I just think it's incredible that I can sit in my living room or my bedroom or my little walk-in closet and make this piece of audio that goes out into the world and actually changes people's lives.
Podcast Junkies, episode 160. I had an amazing time last week at Podfest. More on that in a second. If this is your first time listening, welcome. My name is Harry Duran, host of Podcast Junkies. Been doing this for almost 4 years, 160 episodes as of today. As you heard, did you miss last week's episode? You may want to go back and listen to that one. It was with Mary Nichols, aka DJ Fusion, host of Fusebox Radio. What a fantastic time reminiscing, old schooling. She's been doing this for a long time, gals and guys, and you could learn a lot from her tenacity and starting way before there was even podcasting. So that was a really fun conversation, and it's gotten some good feedback on Twitter. This week, we have the pleasure of speaking with Chel Hamilton. She's the host of the wildly popular Meditation Minis. And in this episode, she explains how she got the idea for the podcast Meditation Minis and why she found it surprising initially that it had such a positive effect on people. She talks about why she designed her show the way she did and when she was first introduced to meditation. She also talks about how she became involved with hypnotherapy and her plans to create a virtual reality immersive guided meditation. That sounds absolutely amazing. We share our experience with float tanks as well. She talks about growing up and moving away from Columbus, Ohio. So much good stuff that's covered here. As always, chock full of interesting, educational, inspiring information. And this one's no different. So please enjoy this conversation with Chel. I mentioned Podfest, which is the conference in Orlando. Podfest Multimedia Expo. Last year was my first time, and this year was my second. They've been doing it 4 years, and Chris Krimitsos and John Dennis, shout out to them. They gave me a great opportunity to speak on Saturday morning. It was, the title of the talk was Hearing Voices in My Head, and it was about how I've gone about finding my voice over the past, couple of decades. I actually start the story back when I was a teenager. So it was great. It was the first time I gave a talk that long on that topic. I've given 10 and 15 minute versions of it, but this was a 40-minute slot, and I was a bit anxious in the beginning, but it filled up well. I had a perfectly sized room. Shout out to Katie Krimitsos was there. Zach was there from Raising Rents. Lee was there from the Colon Cancer Podcast. Natalie Jennings from A Face Project was there, and some new folks as well, some new friends that I met. Polly from Swipe the Podcast, and a couple other folks who I know I'm going to forget. Michelle Shama was there, and from Forbidden Fruit, who I met that weekend, and she's awesome as well. So I'm trying to paint a mental picture of the room. Chris jumped in halfway through, and he said he was tempted to leave, but then the content kept him there. So that's always a good thing when you hear that. So shout out and kudos to the team. I'm definitely going to be going next year. And as always, they had that gratitude ceremony at the end. So, I talk about conferences. I talk about them all the time because I love them so much. And so it would make sense that I chat up the next big one that I'm attending, which is going to be Podcast Movement. Podcast Movement is this July 23rd through the 26th, and it's going to be in Philadelphia. It's interesting because Philadelphia is the capital of I guess what you would call freedom because of the Liberty Bell. I've been there. I believe it has one of the oldest paved roads in America, which I think is fascinating. And so it's been an interesting journey with the Podcast Movement team. It's been so exciting to see what they've been doing over the past 4.5 years. This year in Philadelphia will be year number 5, and I'll be so happy to have my 5-year ribbon because I've been there from the beginning. And it's the first time I think I can say that about any conference that I've been to. And it's just, I love how it's turned into the world's largest gathering of new and veteran podcasters. 2,000 podcasters from around the world. It's going to be over 100 sessions. Even the expo hall itself features over 60 podcast service and equipment providers. So whatever you're in the market for, if it's podcasting related, you're going to find it there. I think it's going to be so great. Every year they keep outdoing themselves. I have so many fond memories of the conference as well. As jam-packed as these sessions are, some of these hallway conversations are priceless. I make it a point to print out and get printed. Sorry, my T-shirts because I want to make an impression, and now people are expecting that year over year. So it's something I have to keep delivering on. So head on over to podcastmovement.com and use coupon code Podcast Junkies when you register to ensure you get your discount for this year's upcoming event. I hope to see you. I'll be in the bright yellow T-shirt, so please be on the lookout for me. This episode is brought to you by Podbean. Did you know that with Podbean, you can create professional podcasts in minutes? It's a really simple platform to use, super user-friendly. They allow you to upload, publish, manage, promote your podcast, all with just the click of a mouse. They've got a great stats page, so you always know exactly how your podcasts are performing, and they give you in-depth view of your audience. You get to see episodes, and you get to see trends as well. It's really all the features you need for starting a podcast: website builder, unlimited storage and bandwidth, search engine optimized. You get your own domain and branding if you so desire, iTunes and Play Store support, and rock solid cloud hosting. They've got incredibly reasonable pricing plans starting at $9 a month for unlimited audio. And one of the good things about it that not a lot of people realize is for video podcasts, they also offer unlimited podcast hosting for video podcasts at a very reasonable $29 a month, which is something we're looking into for our clients as well. So look into those two options if you get a chance. Head on over to podbean.com/podcastjunkies. Make sure you stay till the end of the episode where I reveal this week's retention hashtag. But for now, please enjoy this conversation with the meditative and relaxing Chel. So Chel Hamilton, host of Meditation Minis, thank you so much for joining us on Podcast Junkies.
Totally my honor. Thank you so much for having me.
So last time we saw each other was Podcast Movement, I believe.
Yeah,
and
Podcast Movement.
What's been
you had all the bright yellow shirts.
Yes. And what were your takeaways from the conference?
Oh, gosh, for me, every time I go to conferences full of podcasters, my biggest takeaway really is how freaking amazing the podcaster community and humans involved in podcasting actually are.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they are the most enthusiastic, genuinely helpful, caring humans. And I just love to go to hang out with them, to go, wow, these people are so awesome. We need more of people like this in the world.
And how many podcast movement conferences had you been to at that point?
That was my third year.
Okay. It's been interesting, the growth of it. I remember, so that was my fourth. So I did the Kickstarter one the first year, and that was just amazing to see how fast interest picked up when they announced it, and they quickly had to change venues, I think 3 times or twice.
Yeah.
So I've been friends with Jared and the team for a while now, and I'm really proud of what they've put together. I think there were 2,000 people at the last conference.
Yeah, it was amazing. It's just great.
Were there any sessions that were of interest to you, or some that you thought you were going to attend when you got there, and then maybe you changed course over the course of the next 3 days?
Gosh, it was such a whirlwind.
Yeah.
Yes, there were. There was. I really thought that the little spark things were fun.
Oh yeah, the talks.
Yeah. And I wouldn't have gone to that if I hadn't been somebody doing one of the sparks.
Okay.
So I've never seen that format before. I would love to see something like that incorporated into the main event at some point, just because it was so great to hear these little 5-minute things from a bunch of different people. So
for the benefit of the listener, can you give an overview of what the format was like and about how many folks were participating?
Yeah, I think there was about 16 of us, and they're just short 5-minute talks. You get 20 slides, and they're on 20-second auto fast forward. So you can't, if you mess up, you just have to keep going.
Okay.
And you didn't necessarily have to talk about podcasting. Typically with Spark Talks, anything where you're teaching an interesting point in a humorous way tends to work really well.
Okay. Yeah, I did PMX talks, which is like it's sort of like that. That's the precursor to that, and that was 15 minutes. I've done that twice twice in a row. So it's been very helpful. And I took formal speaker training at the beginning of this year. So I did the PMX talks before the training. And so now I've done it differently now. But it's just interesting how much you can do. When I was in a speak off when I did my training, and I had 3 minutes to qualify for the speak off, and it was 42 entrants, and I made it to the top 12. And so in the final 12, they get 5 minutes. But it was crazy to think about. Like I thought I had 5 minutes, and they're like, "No, you have 3." I was like,
You're like,
"What?" And so you tell your story. You have to tell a whole story. It's a whole story arc, which is fascinating. So did you have speaker training before you did the Spark Talk?
No, I mean, I've spoken in groups and stuff, and I've done like some workshops, and I do kind of talk for a living because I'm a hypnotherapist. Mm-hmm. But it was a different kind of thing. Yeah, for sure.
So tell me about the moment when you had the idea for Meditation Minis.
I was super not going to do this show. Like there was no. Can I swear on your show?
Yes,
by the
way?
Okay, so there was no fucking way that I was going to do a meditation podcast. And I am probably the least woo-woo hypnotherapist. I actually thought hypnotherapy was bullshit. Mm-hmm. And I've been doing it for over 10 years. So being in a state of full resistance is not uncommon in my life when it comes to these kind of big changes. And I was not going to do this podcast. I actually had several other ideas for shows. I even recorded, I think, 7 or 8 episodes of another entire show. And that was December of 2014. And when I listened to that show, it was like a coaching call show. When I listened to it, I was like, no, I do not want to be known as the person whose podcast is telling other people what to do all day. Like, I may be really good at doing that, but that is not what I want for my show. And a girlfriend of mine, Karen, who I think you've actually had on your show.
Oh, Yankovic.
Yeah.
Yes, she's awesome.
She kept telling me, you should really do meditation. You should really do meditation. I'm like, nah, I swear. And I like to drink red wine, and I'm not a guru. And so finally, I was like, all right, fuck it. I'll like do 6 episodes and see what happens. Yeah. And 6 million downloads later.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I literally get emails from people. I just got one the other day. Harry, I get these emails from people, and they're telling me how the podcast has changed their life. And I literally don't know how to write them back because I'm just like, I don't even know what to say to that. I'm so overwhelmed sometimes with the effect that the show has had in other people's lives and gratitude and feeling blessed that I have difficulty finding words.
Why'd that catch you off guard? Why was that surprising for you?
I just think, look, I'm going to tear up. I just think it's incredible that I can sit in my living room or my bedroom or my little walk-in closet and make this piece of audio that goes out into the world and actually changes people's lives. Where they write me and they say things like, I have post-traumatic stress disorder and I wasn't able to sleep for the past 7 years, and I am now sleeping because I use your podcast to help me manage my stress and anxiety. Or people saying that 16 years of therapy didn't do as much good as 3 weeks of listening to my podcast.
Wow.
Like, yeah. I'm like, that's amazing. The power of words spoken with intention that's focused on creating a solution.
It seems like it's an important part of the formula, because if you had that intention of wanting that outcome, that's going to color your thought process in terms of what you say, especially since it's such a short, I mean, these are 12-minute episodes roughly, right? And
yeah.
So it sounds like you were conscious of the energy you were going to put into each one of these. And so it's almost like it's short, but it's concentrated, like it's like an espresso, right?
Yeah, that's a great way of thinking. Except espresso that makes you like...
It's the opposite. Anti-espresso.
A soothing espresso.
Soothing espresso, yeah.
So I designed this show because I wanted it to be something that I would be willing to listen to, and I'm busy
Yep.
and I don't have time for bullshit, and I'm results oriented and I have ADD. So 10-ish minutes was the goal. And every episode, I want somebody to be able to look through and be like, oh, I'm feeling this today and I want to feel that. And so they find an episode that's going to take them there. From being freaked out to being like happy, or from being pissed off to being calm.
Yeah, it's so interesting because, you know, when you look at some of the recent titles, or like Healing Garden Meditation, you get the visual, right? And then 1 minute habit changer, and you're like, oh, I got a minute. And then you actually need 11 minutes for that one.
Well, the process takes 1 minute once you learn it.
Yeah, which is cool. And then but I love how they speak to what you could be feeling in the moment, and you're like, from fear to fun. And
that's a really popular episode, actually.
Well, it's interesting because it helps you understand. It's almost like the topic that's popular helps you get an understanding for what's happening, at least for your audience, and where they're gravitating towards. Does that at all color future episodes?
Totally.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, totally. Right now, I attempt to do like every fourth or fifth episode is more of a pure relaxation one. And then probably every 8 to 9 episodes, and these are just rough guesstimates. So anybody who's looking and says, oh, you didn't do it in 16 episodes, well, it's just a rough guesstimate. I try to do some kind of more quote unquote proper meditation practice, like a focal point practice, because ultimately the goal is that people can then feel comfortable, if they want to move into what would be considered more of a mindfulness proper practice that doesn't involve my voice or anybody's voice, even their own voice, ultimately.
Except the voices in their head.
Well, those are the ones that you want to eventually like not chase, right? That's kind of the point.
Yeah.
And it's not that they don't come up, but you just learn to recognize them and not get involved in the conversation.
Can you remember when you first became aware of this idea of meditation? Oh,
gosh. As a kid, really. I was like that weird little kid who I joke, but it's true. I would read the Encyclopedia Britannica for fun.
Yeah.
I was really interested in how things worked and why people believed what they believed. And I was very into like mysteries, Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys. Yeah. So it was always about like how things work and perceptions. And I remember being fascinated by like the rosary and how that practice kind of feels like you go into a trance, which is a form of meditation.
Yeah, totally.
But I didn't do proper meditation probably. Well, I read some Bhagwan Rajneesh, who later became Osho.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
We'll have to put it. So for the benefit of the listener, the 30-second version, because this could be the 30-year version, but can you describe who Osho is?
Yeah. So the Bhagwan Rajneesh was this guy from India who created what some would consider a cult, but it was definitely a movement of religious following. And he went silent for, I think, 3 years. And the people who were in charge with him supposedly are the ones who like bought he had like a Rolls Royce for every day of the year and just super decadent. And then he reinvented himself later and called himself Osho. But I love him because I find him to be the real embodiment of the trickster energy.
It's interesting.
That he very irreverent and pokes.
Because he channels, right?
I don't know if he channels.
I think he does.
Maybe. Yeah. He's had a lot of incarnations in his life, but he incarnations in reinventing himself in his life.
There's someone that channels as well, known as Abraham. Abraham Hicks, and
Oh yes,
yeah.
yes. The
But it's interesting. At the end of the day, like all you have to do is listen to the message, and if you resonate with it, it really doesn't matter where it came from, and if it's helping you and it's adding value and it's helping you see things from a different perspective. Don't get so tied up as to what the source was, because I think people too many times are like, no, that can't be true. I'm just forget about it. I just listen to it, and if you can use it in your life and it helps you get through something, a specific challenge, then, that's a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
And
it's probably all from the subconscious mind anyway, which
Yeah.
is a powerful powerhouse of knowledge.
So how did you move into hypnotherapy?
Again, really resistant.
I'm noticing a trend here. Okay.
Yeah. So now at least I'm smart enough to look for when I'm super resistant to something to go, aha, perhaps there is something important there. I was living in Los Angeles. I was a struggling screenwriter, which really meant I was a bartender. And I needed a job change. And I made this list of parameters that the new job had to have. As far as the amount of education and I just basically told the universe, anything that hits 4 of the 5 things on this list, I will investigate. And the hypnosis thing kept coming up, and it actually hit technically all 5 of the things on the list, and I kept not putting it on the list.
What were the 5 things on the list?
They were pretty practical. One was it had to take 2 years or less of education if it required getting more education. I had to make, I believe the number was $36,000 or $38,000 a year the first year after my education, but that had to quickly scale to 62.
Yep.
I don't know. I think I came up with the numbers because I was basing things on cost of living and childcare.
Yeah.
And I could make a little less than that if I was able to be available at 3:00 when my son was off school, but I had to make the top number if I was going to have to pay for childcare. And then the last one was to be in service to others, to help others, because that was the one thing that I knew getting out of bed in the morning. Those were days that felt really good.
And so that landed you in hypnotherapy, and then you started studying that. And so what? And then that was 2 years.
That was actually a year-long program. It was 850 hours, pretty intensive year.
Okay.
And then I graduated right around Christmas of 2006 and moved back to Columbus, Ohio in April and started my practice and have been working full-time ever since the first couple of months.
So obviously then you need to shift, because then you have to get your entrepreneurial and business hat on, right? And out of the student mode. And how was that? Can you talk a little bit about that transition? Because, we have a lot of folks who have podcasts and have a business and have a combination and are just doing it as a hobby. But I think that's a point where people struggle, right? Because the skills needed in those two realms are completely different and sometimes at oppositions to each other.
They are really different. And I didn't realize that, looking back now, I see it, the number of classmates that I graduated with that aren't practicing because they just don't have the business sense to make it happen.
Yeah.
So I did a couple of things really smart off the bat. The first smart thing was that I named my business Columbus, Ohio Hypnosis.
That's smart.
Right? It's not sexy, but it works.
That does work. Sometimes we tend to overthink these things, but then when you think about what people search for in Google, that is exactly the phrase. Yes.
Yeah. So I think throughout, from work with that, as well as the podcast, one of the things that has allowed me to grow the way that I have is that I am aware that I need to create something and name things the way that people search for them as much as I possibly can.
And does that ties, I would imagine that ties into the naming of your podcast episodes.
Absolutely.
That's so good.
Not only the episodes, but also the whole concept for this show really coalesced when I started looking at what people were searching for. They were searching for short meditations, 5-minute meditations, 10-minute meditations, how to meditate, meditation and anxiety, meditation and insomnia. And I used to get panic attacks. I have from time to time struggled with insomnia. It's way better now than it used to be. And so it just felt like, as I was looking at the search, oh, well, this is a perfect fit.
Yeah.
And somebody else would have told me, well, you should do a podcast that's hypnotherapy and it's for weight loss because everybody wants to lose weight. And I was like, well, hypnosis, then you have to like convince people of a whole other set of things.
Mm-hmm.
People are already comfortable with meditation. And I have a soothing voice and I used to get panic attacks and I have sleep issues. So meditation minis, short, sweet, focused on anxiety, stress, is perfect.
Yeah,
so it's about being smart,
yeah.
solving a problem. And at that time, there were no short meditation shows in iTunes, by the way. So I even looked at iTunes at that time because it was the January 2015.
Where's that skill set come from? Because that's not a thought process that a lot of people go through. So this idea of like, had you just been online for so many years, you see how, sort of like, not that you're trying to game the system, but you see how the system works. And obviously search engine optimization is great. And everybody's been in Google sort of typing in words and seeing what Google pre-populates. And so that's really important research. And I'm wondering how you learn that, or just self-taught.
Probably those mystery books.
choose your own adventure.
It's like you're looking for the clues, trying to find out this stuff. It's probably a lot of that just wanting to see the pieces and putting them together in a way that I can deliver information that's within my wheelhouse, right? So it's within my competency and it's within my passion, but it wasn't just my passion.
What else was it?
Definitely competency. It was a skill set.
Yeah.
And it was a willingness to, people say you got to niche down. I don't know that I niche down as much as I just focused my message.
Okay. When did you realize that the show was getting traction beyond what you might have initially expected?
By the end of the first year. So originally, and I probably need to go back and change the about the podcast thing. Originally, I was just going to do the show for 1 year.
Okay.
And I was going to be done. And that was my commitment, a 1-year commitment. And at the end of the year, I was like, wow. So I'm getting lots of downloads. And I've gotten, one of the reasons why I did the show initially was so that I could get clients from all over the world who would want to book hypnotherapy sessions with me on the phone and Skype. And that worked for sure. And I have had amazing clients that I never, famous, really famous clients.
Really?
Yes.
And they found you through the podcast?
Yes. Awesome. And they trusted me through the podcast.
Well, yeah, they talk about this idea of know, like, and trust, right? And they have to know who you are, and then they have to like you, and then they have to trust you. And I think that's such an interesting journey when what it is you're providing is adding value, and they're coming in and week out, and just like, it's like, yes, this is helping, and such a natural transition from there to say, like, well, if she's doing this in 10 minutes, what if I had a half hour, or what if I had an hour with Chel? Like, how amazing would that be?
Exactly. And to have it customized for exactly what's going on in their brain.
Yeah. I shout out to, Katie Krimitsos. Did you meet Katie?
Yeah. I love Katie.
Katie. So she was on a podcast with Dana Boss Mom podcast, and they were talking about know, like, trust, but she changed it. She said know, love, trust. And I was like, oh, that's good.
Like that. Yeah, that's much better, actually.
I like that much better. I've got a tweet I want to put out and just give her a shout out for that, because that was awesome. And I was like, oh, it seemed like an obvious, upgrade or level up of that phrase. And she's the first one I've ever heard that said it. So that was pretty cool.
That would make a really good t-shirt. Yes.
We should make that. Let's get it on the list. Entrepreneurs are always thinking about new business ideas. So that's a great segue, because when did you realize that in addition to your practice, because you now have a shop store and a shop link, and you want to talk about as you started to think about how that content could be repurposed into something that people can buy.
Yeah. So a little caveat. I'm in the process of redoing the website, so some of the things aren't working right now. I have played around with different models I did like an ad-free thing, and I'm actually the world's worst at doing anything consistently throughout the week. I'm more of a all-in, do a project and then go do another project.
Yeah.
So I'm revamping this year, and instead of doing a subscription model for the ad-free versions of the show, I'm going to offer playlists, which actually I think is a better value for my listeners because they can buy the playlist for anxiety or the playlist for sleep and get specific suggestions based on the things that I think work better. So ultimately, it's actually a better choice. And then I have an album that I did because people kept saying, I want longer meditations and I don't want the gong at the end. And I'm like, yeah, but what you're asking for isn't meditation minis. So I made an hour-long album, and I plan to do 2 more. Originally, I was going to do like 1 every 2 months, but it's so much fucking work. I had no idea. An hour-long album is exponentially more work than a 12-minute podcast. I just thought, it'd be like, 4 or 5 meditation minis. Oh, no.
Well, yeah, you don't know until you try it.
Right. So 2 albums this year is the goal.
Yeah. Okay. And what's the practice? I mean, besides the production aspect, what's needed for you to think about something that's do you think about something differently when you're presenting it in that format for an hour as opposed to something that's 10 minutes? Because the 10 minutes, I'm just thinking about, does it have a start and a stop and the middle, beginning, middle, and end? And do you just expand that out for a longer one?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I definitely have a different process of making longer work. With the album, the Tranquility album that I made, the idea was to create something that people could easily fall asleep to, that could even be playing all night long without waking them up. Yep. And so I took a piece of music and I made it's basically 3 20-minute meditations, but I made them as seamless as possible so that there's no long, quiet pause. And actually the end of the music at the end of the album slides right back into the beginning of the music on the album.
Okay. So if they loop them, it'd be seamless.
It would feel very seamless. And throughout the actual meditations, the sound goes a little higher and a little lower, but the idea was to never have it be to never have it to such a degree that it would wake you up, like it would feel like too silent for too long, and then suddenly there's a noise happening. And then the other thing I do in my production, especially for that album, like if you were to listen to that album in the car, it would sound like shit. You're not supposed to listen to it in the car, obviously, because you're supposed to be eyes closed.
Yeah, you have the disclaimer on don't operate heavy machinery.
Yes, don't do that. Yeah. But when I mix bass heavy, and I cut out as much high end as possible. And I do that for the podcast as well, but in the album even more so, because I design my show. I actually consider myself kind of a guided meditation artist.
Okay.
And I design the experience to be on not so great earbuds because that's how most people listen to the show.
Yeah.
They're going to listen on crappy earbuds. I mean, not everybody, but the majority. Or on their, crappy phone speaker or their crappy laptop speaker. And so I really try to design the audio experience to match how the majority of the listeners are listening.
So that's a different skill set. So where'd that come into play? Because I don't know that a lot of hypnotherapists are playing around with bass and treble settings.
See, the universe totally knew what it was doing, like my whole life, and I didn't even know that it knew. I used to be in rock and roll bands at one point in my life.
It's all coming together.
Yeah, so I'm not an audio snob, but I am particular about what I like for me. Yeah. And I'm sensitive to things like I have a female voice. So when I'm picking royalty-free music, I do not pick stuff with a lot of high end. And if I need to transpose it, I will. Mm-hmm. I don't like a lot of the meditation music out there has that like high end stuff going on, and I won't use it. Because it doesn't, if you're a dude, it might work, but not for me.
That's another question. How does your audience skew?
Mostly female.
Okay.
Yeah, like 70, 80% at any given time is female.
What do you edit in?
I use GarageBand.
GarageBand, okay.
Yeah. I may switch over to something, especially now that my goal for this year is rather audacious. By the end of the year, I want to be creating all of my own background music for the show as well.
So music, actual music, original music production.
Yes, although I am not opposed to using MIDI loops and then cutting things out and moving things around because I'm not actually a musician. I can play a little guitar, enough to write some songs on, but certainly not piano, and piano is more of what I want to do.
Yeah, so I grew up as a DJ. At this point, I'm showing every time I have someone, you can see the turntables in the background.
Yes.
The 1200s. And so I learned on vinyl, but then I graduated to tractor DJing. And then eventually I felt like I wanted to start producing tracks. So I learned Ableton Live.
Yeah.
I took a mastering class. And interestingly, in my mastering class, I met the guy who does the theme for Podcast Junkies. So it all
so great.
Comes full circle. But it's been fascinating to understand that. And so when I got to podcasting and editing, I'm like, well, I've done music and stems and bass and percussion. So I think some voice in one music track shouldn't be that hard. And I got sucked into it. It was so interesting. Dave Jackson, who have you met Dave? Dave Jackson?
Oh, yeah.
Podcasting? Yeah. He's great. One of his shows was interesting because he intersperses like sound bits. And so on my earlier shows, I don't do this now because it'd be crazy time intensive. But when they would mention, there was someone that mentioned Jerry Seinfeld, and then I found the snippet of the interview and I put it in there. And they mentioned 2 songs, and I was like, I grabbed, and we talked about freestyle music, which I grew up with, and I know there's not a lot of copyright issues with that. So I built this whole sonic journey, and it's fun. I sort of wish I could do that. But I just had an interview with someone, and she was throwing out a lot of old school hip hop references and old school house music references. And I was like, that would be so nice if I did a bonus episode that had the regular interview, but then the interview with like the director's cut, I guess is what you'd call it.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. I was like, well, you should just do like a quarterly best of.
Yeah. Do you like the fact that you sort of like can now pull all the different things that you learned and all the things that you're like, oh, I'm in this rock band. Oh, and I know a little bit of like tech work and I sound good on the mic, and, in different parts of your life journey, like you were using that one specific skill set, but it's just, isn't it nice when it all comes together and you're like, look at this, all the pieces.
Totally. Yeah. It amazes me. Like I said, the universe knew what it was doing. Yeah. I mean, before I was struggling as a screenwriter, I was a minorly published and produced playwright.
Yeah. Okay.
Which is storytelling and creating emotions with words. And then I became a hypnotherapist, which is getting your subconscious mind through stories and words to change what it's doing. It's all it all adds together. And then my next thing that I'm super excited about is I am obsessed with virtual reality. And my plan this year is to create at least one, if not more, virtual reality, immersive, guided meditations where you can just like go and be on a hyper realistic beach and hear my voice. And so super excited.
That's interesting. I probably want to chat a little bit about that. How have you been in contact with folks that do that type of production, or have you done the research?
Yeah, magic would have it happen that yes, this week that person walked into my office.
Wow. And so you would need a headset to experience it, but is the learning curve, if you know podcasting, to move into that, is it a big jump, or do you find that there's some overlap to help you make that hop a little smoother?
Well, I would not attempt to do the designing of the environment, the visual environment. I would be in charge of doing the story, the audio, the sound effects, the music. So the auditory part of the experience, and guiding like what kinds of visuals have been shown in studies to create XYZ effect. Like I actually want to create something that is therapeutic.
Yeah, maybe some sacred geometry.
Yeah.
That'd be pretty cool. Well, it's a whole new world there, and I really think, like, I have visions of Podcast Junkies being a talk show, but then it could be a virtual reality show, right? What if it was just like 2 avatars talking, and you wanted to experience there that you're sitting in. So it's the three of us and me and the guest, and you're sitting with us. And because this is what I've always said, it's like I'm at a bar, I'm talking to my guest, and you pull up a chair and you're just listening. So listener, we haven't forgotten about you. You're here with us. And that's, why not do that? And it's happening. It's happening, and people are probably already doing it. People are in the virtual reality world. People are probably having some sort of interviews. So yeah, let's keep talking, because I like trying new things. I like being on the cutting edge, and I just like creating this idea of creating immersive environments. I think is something that's going to be really big. It's not so much the virtual reality, interestingly enough, it's the augmented reality, where you take the real world and you just add another layer on top of it. So,
and I look forward to getting into that as well. My whole thing is we have all this technology, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So there's got to be a group of people on the planet who are sincerely focused on using it for betterment of each individual.
Yeah.
Because if not, it's going to not be for the betterment of each individual.
And I think you've built up enough of an audience who trusts you. So we talk about know, like, trust, right? So now they trust you. So now when you want to move into this new arena, they said, well, of course. I mean, just like I get so much value out of meditation minis. Chel is awesome. And it's almost like it's yours to like, it's your opportunity to lose, because you've built up that goodwill already. So they're going to give you a shot, whatever you try next. And they're like, yes, anything that you're doing, I'm going to give it a shot. And you sort of like carry these fans along with you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm really excited about the therapeutic possibilities. They've already shown that VR technology, just looking at a headset on your phone, can dramatically reduce the pain that you're experiencing in your physical body.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Have you ever tried a float tank?
Oh yeah, I go all the time.
I'm a big fan.
It's my other way to meditate.
Oh yeah, the first time I did it, it's the only opportunity we have since we've been out of the womb to float and lose all contact with like the material world. Maybe if you do skydiving, but the fact that it's the water's the same temperature as your body temperature.
Yes.
And then you literally feel like you're not connected to anything. I've done it for an hour, and it's just total lights off. People get freaked out by it, I think, if they've never experienced it, but I find it incredibly fascinating.
It took me 3 times of doing it, because I used to get panic attacks, right? So I was very like shot. And one of the things that I get panicky about is claustrophobia. Even as a kid, I couldn't put my head under a bed or even under a chair without like totally freaking out.
Yeah.
I don't know what that was about, but it's not like that anymore. So the first time I went, I took the big towel and rolled it up. Well, at first I had the whole thing open, but you get actually kind of cold when it's totally open.
Yeah.
So then I had the big towel rolled up, and I closed the lid down on the towel, so I still had a good 10 inches of space.
Okay.
And then the next time, and I think I left the light on for half of it. And then the next time I used the small towel.
Okay.
And then by the third time I used the small towel for like half of it, and then I closed it down, and I was fine.
So are you in tanks that allow you to stand up in them, or no? You have to lie down?
No, it's a lie down tank with a hydraulic lid, but you're also in a room by yourself. Okay. That you can lock and has a shower.
The ones I've tried here, you step into the tub, and when you're in the tub, you can still stand up. So that you're closing a door. It's like a huge shower stall, so it's obviously insulated, so that you don't get the claustrophobia as much. And then you just take your time to lie down. And for the listener who hasn't tried it, it's 1,000 pounds of Epsom of salt that allows you to automatically to float the minute you step in, and that's what gives you.
You don't get pruny or anything.
It's actually good for your skin, from what I've heard.
Well, it's really good for your body. So one of the things that we tend to not get enough of is magnesium. We used to be like running around in the dirt and everything, and we get plenty of magnesium in our system, and now we don't. So jumping in that thing once a month even is going to help magnesium levels in your body, which make you feel calmer and less anxiety.
So changing gears for a little bit here. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, home of the Black Eyes.
Okay.
Yeah, I moved away the first time when I was 16. I did the AFS High School Foreign Exchange program. And when they asked me on the application where I wanted to go, I said any place but not the normal places. Like I didn't want France or Germany or England. And so they sent me to Istanbul, Turkey.
Wow, nice.
when I was 16 for a year. That was awesome. And then I just kept kind of leaving Columbus. I lived in Dallas for about 4 years. I lived in Los Angeles for 8.
Okay.
I lived in London for about a year, a couple other little places in between. Moved back to Columbus in 2007 with my son because I wanted him to be, we were in LA at the time, and I wanted him to be able to play out in the yard without me freaking out, and to, ride his bike down the street and hang out with friends without me freaking out. And it's been really good. And he's about to graduate next year, so I don't know where I'll go after that.
Is that how you know Dave Jackson? Because he's in Columbus.
No, we just happenstance figured that out. We met at a podcast movement.
Okay. Yeah, he's a really good guy. Is there I imagine there's a podcast meetup there.
There is. Blueberry, I think, has one. Okay. Or Blueberry. Is that how you say it?
Blueberry, yeah, Blueberry.
Yeah, Blueberry.
So out of the friends you've had, like, over the years, who is the most surprised at where you've ended up?
My mom.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah, my mom. She's like, I don't quite understand it, but it sounds good. And when I talked to her a couple months ago, and I was like, oh, Mom, I just got 5 million downloads on the podcast. She's like, that's really good. She's like, so are you actually making money?
It's so funny. That's always the first question. Always the first question, regardless. I think just parents will be parents, and I'm sure you'll ask your child the same question when they start.
Yeah, I'm like, no. And she's like, wow, because if you could make like 25 cents a download, you'd have a lot of money right now. I'm like, yeah, Mom, I know.
What's been your relationship with sponsors?
So I host with Audio Boom.
Yep. And
they get all the sponsors. They take care of all of that for me. Actually, today they just sent me a bottle of champagne.
Oh, nice. Very cool.
Yeah. So they take care of it. The only frustration I have is when I occasionally have to do like a make good, a live read ad because I messed something up or something wasn't conveyed clearly. I've only ever fought on one of those. The rest of them, I've always been like, okay.
Okay. And you feel like it's over, because that's another skill too, like the ability to read it in a way where it's seamless. And some of the best podcasts, you just forget that you're in the middle of an ad. You're like, or they're so good, you listen to the ad.
I would hope that mine have that feel.
Yeah. So it's an acquired skill. So as you think about the growth, are there things that you'd like to put in place or places where you can promote the show or just kind of in terms of growth, like, because you've grown to such a great spot now, and do you actively think about other ways that you can grow the show that you haven't tried yet?
I'm always thinking of ways to grow the show, just because, well, one, it's nice getting some money from the ads.
Yep.
But number two, the more people who find the show, the more I'm spreading this resource that can help them transform their lives, so that they, for every person who writes me one of those crazy emails that I'm like, I don't know how to respond to this because it's so fucking amazing.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's 20 that didn't.
Yeah. And because do you actively promote or talk about the folks that respond in terms of like the reviews or even the comments, and just kind of give them shout outs?
Every once in a while I do. I have found that a lot of my my listenership is really pretty private.
Okay.
They're fairly private people. Yeah. So I have, and if I haven't asked for their name, then I keep it general, but I will typically ask for their name. Of course, if they leave a review and they've left their name, that's different because it's in a public sphere. But from a personal email, I'm pretty protective. Yeah, I'm always thinking about how to grow. Like, I love going to conventions because I meet other people.
Yeah.
And that always ends up growing the podcast to some degree. At this point, the more that I can connect with other people who are, therapists, health coaches, then that's going to spread it even further.
I do have do you appear on a lot of podcasts, or have you been asked to appear on a lot of podcasts?
Yeah, you know what? This past year, not so much. The first couple of years I did. So if anybody, wants to contact me, fine. The other thing I would throw out to your listeners is anybody who thinks that they can't do a show that feeds their actual business, let's talk. Because I bet if you're willing to be open-minded to some ideas, we could figure something out.
I love that. And I actually have a Facebook group for my business because we do Done For You podcasting, and I created a group called Podcasting for Thought Leaders, where it's just for podcasters who want to use a podcast to grow their business. So I'm a big fan of that approach.
And that's basically what Meditation Minis was. Yeah. It was a way for me to grow my hypnotherapy business and to make me location independent.
Yes.
But at this point, it's gotten to the point where I want to do large workshops and do more speaking.
That's perfect. Yeah, and it lends itself. Yeah. There's no better audition tape than a couple years worth of podcasts for people who want to, like, how do you sound? And like, well, as a matter of fact, glad you asked. Go listen to my show.
Exactly.
So yeah. So you are going to be doing that. Is the plan more speaking in 2018 and stages?
Yeah. I have booked my space. I haven't actually put it out in the world yet, but I'll put it out here because by the time this comes out, it'll probably be fine to tell everybody.
Yeah.
I have my first 3-day workshop in April 20th in Columbus, Ohio.
Nice.
And it's an emotional detox weekend.
That sounds interesting. Yeah, make sure you give me the details on that. We'll put it in the show notes because I think by the time it's out, we'll see if people are interested and we can get them over there.
Wonderful.
Have you ever heard of 432 hertz music?
I have not heard of that, and I've heard of a lot of things.
So Google it. I don't want to take you down a rabbit hole, but it's essentially has something to do with the Schumann resonance and yeah. So it's just music that's recorded at that hertz, and it has more like connects more to you, and it gets into like your chakras and stuff like that. So you might want to be able, since you're into the music part, that'd be a nice thing to mix into. So
see, that's going to be a part of what yes. Thank you so much.
A couple of questions as we wrap up. What's something you've changed your mind about recently?
Something I've changed my mind about recently. Oh gosh, I change my mind all of the time. Can we come back to that one? Yeah. Ask me the next one.
What's the most misunderstood thing about you?
A lot of times I think I have really good resting bitch face. And so people think that I'm unapproachable.
Yeah.
And I'm actually very warm and fuzzy. Although I am an introvert, I'm still very warm and fuzzy. So yeah, the most misunderstood thing about me is my resting bitch face.
Okay. That's good to know. So everyone knows that if you see Chel in the hallway, she's just waiting for your hug.
That's right. Yeah, just come up and hug me. I'll be like, yeah, bring it. Let's go.
Something you change your mind about?
Something I changed. I thought I wasn't an angry person. I thought I didn't have any anger left. And in the past couple of months, I've had a couple of situations where I allowed my anger to be triggered to a much higher degree than I thought was even possible since my 20s. Now, I could throw out the almost 50 card and say that like there's some hormonal stuff going on, but I think it's really just that, as you peel back more things, you also get more sensitive.
Yeah, makes sense.
And so I get to figure out new ways to not let that surprise me and not have to go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, it's interesting that you had that awareness that there's a change in your that type of response, which is different than I guess how you thought you'd react. But the fact that you can actually observe it, and this is what I learned in Buddhism, like to just be aware of the emotion. And a lot of people like to say, I'm angry. And I'm like, well, technically you are experiencing anger.
Right.
And so it's the difference. And you don't have to, because when they say I'm angry, you're like actually putting it on and wearing it, as opposed to like, oh, I'm going to try this and then I'm going to take it off. But it's not me.
Yeah, totally. It happened like twice in a 2-month span. And it wasn't huge, but it was intense. And I remember in each moment, there was a part of me going, whoa, what is this right now? What are you doing? Who is this person who's taken over your voice?
Well, you caught yourself. That's the important thing.
In the moment, I couldn't stop it in the moment. It was just still like this. I'm like, wow, I didn't know you had that in you.
Well, it's good to get it out because then it's probably like you were probably able to exercise that in a moment where the repercussions weren't as serious as to maybe like a year down and you're in a business environment or something in a meeting and that happens. And I think everything for a reason.
Yeah. That would be bad.
So thank you so much for taking the time to appear. I mean, I know that we just had this passing. I have a lot of hallway conversations at Podcast Movement, but then we meet people and I was like, oh, I think I want to have a deeper conversation. And I think what you're doing is really a needed and welcome resource for the podcasting community, because especially, we get so caught up in our day-to-day lives, and to know that our fellow peers are creating tools for us that can help us as a podcaster. And then it's just, we have that common interest. And as you've found, the podcasting community is so helpful and so generous. And I think we just all want to help each other.
Yeah, they are awesome. They are definitely, I am actually so proud to be a podcaster so that I can be a part of that community of humans. Like, at one point I was going to stop doing my show. Yeah. And one of the things that stopped me from doing that was, well, wait, then I won't be able to hang out with some of these really awesome humans. And I want to be one of them.
That's so true, because I've got a couple of friends that I met I remember from hanging out at the earlier conferences, and I'm like, are you going again this year? Like, no, I stopped my show. I'm like, oh man, like it's like the best advertisement for like the conference should be like, don't stop your show, because then you'll stop coming to the podcast movement.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's good. That should be Jared and Dan's objective. Make sure people don't stop. But there's always new people on, and it's just fascinating to see to have the relationships with people who've been doing it 10 or 12 years, like Dave Jackson, who's officially gotten 3 mentions on this show now. So.
Well, when you've been in the game that long, you deserve it.
You deserve it. He's a great guy too. And then new people too. So I'm really excited for what you're doing. I'm glad we're friends and we got to chat a little bit more so I could know your story. It's just fascinating, especially when you mix in the music part, and we have that in common. And I love to see how people can sort of pull all their skill sets they learned over the years, and put them to good use.
Yeah. Yeah, it's beautiful. So thank you so much.
Yes. So what's the best place for folks to track you down or to engage with you?
ChelHamilton.com, CHEL Hamilton.com.
Thank you again. Have a fantastic holiday. We're recording this prior to Christmas, but it'll come out afterwards. But I'm sure you'll have had an amazing holiday, New Year.
Thank you. It was so good to see you, and I will talk to you again soon.
Yes. Thanks again to Chel for coming on the show. As always, full show notes are available at podcastjunkies.com/160. Intro and outro music composed by Cedar and Soil, cedarsoil.com. And please don't forget to support our episode sponsors, Podbean at podbean.com/podcastjunkies and Podcast Movement at podcastmovement.com. Use coupon code podcastjunkies, all one word, to receive your discounted ticket. Tune in next week for my conversation with D.S. Moss, host of The Adventures of Memento Mori. If you made it this far, you're looking for the retention hashtag. Let's go with Meditation Chel, one word, and you can tag her at Hypnotist Chel. So it's a bit of a spelling test there. It's going to be HYPNOTISTCHEL. That's her Twitter handle. So again, the retention hashtag is Meditation Chel, and tag her at Hypnotist Chel and us at podcast_junkies. Thank you so much for everything you do to support the show. I wouldn't be here without you. Love you guys. Talk to you next week.